Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're trading well today. I've gotten some questions lately about what my day-to-day trading looks like, particularly for micro-cap stocks. I think my small cap and my mid caps are pretty obvious. I just look at the financials, I look for value, and that's pretty much it. But when it comes to micro caps, it's a little bit different. The market and the trading is different, at least for me. So we've got two stocks here. We've got VRS, which moved up quite nicely today, and then we've got WOA, which moved up even nicer. So let's have a look at the announcement for WOA. We've got a stock here that signed an exclusive global license to create a plant-based protein for human consumption. So the first things first I realized is that this is basically sounding a lot like Beyond Meats, or BYND. And if we bring up BYND on the charts, we can see that this company multi-bagged sometime last year, middle of last year. Now, there's still a lot of interest in this stock and this kind of sector, this fake meat sector. So this story was already interesting. So having a look at WOA, we go back to the announcement and we see this line here that it's growing 14% per annum. It's forecasted at $40 billion by 2025, yada, yada, yada. That to me is just a bit of marketing. I don't find any real interest in that. But I know other people will see that and see that as a really good positive sign for the company. To me, it's just whatever. Now, this is where the stock mentions, or the company mentions, Beyond Meats and Impossible Foods. So the story that I see here is that people are going to see this as the next Beyond Meats. Now, I don't trade micro caps thinking that these guys are going to go anywhere. I don't think any micro cap is going to go anywhere. Statistically, something like 99.8% of micro caps just never go anywhere anyway. Like they'll hit 100 mil sometimes and they'll come back down to whatever the 10, 20 mil market cap that they are. So I have no interest in holding micro cap stocks. I'm just interested in trading the story. And the story here that I'm seeing is that these guys are basically trying to be the next Beyond Meats. That's how I interpret this document. Now, these stocks that I'm going to mention today aren't an indication to buy or sell. They're not recommendations to buy or sell. This is just me discussing how I see trading opportunities on the ASX, particularly in the microcap space. And of course, I'm not a financial advisor, and none of this is financial advice, purely education. So what I saw is that these guys have 60%, or rather that the protein, 60% of global production is in WA. And if I scroll down at the bottom of the document, I can see that there's only a market of $200 million in Australia. That's how I read this dot point here. So it's pretty unremarkable as a company. I didn't really read too much into the rest of the document. All I really saw in this was, hey, we've got a microcap stock that's sitting at I think it was like $6 million, and they're going to be the next Beyond Meats. That was the story that I saw. And if I go back to the charts, you can see this red line here. That was the horizontal resistance, and it gapped up above it. And the interesting thing was, because the news came out in the morning before the market opened, I could see the order book was slowly growing. It was gradual. So, every 5 minutes it would go from 18 cents to 18.5, then 18.5 to 19. It wasn't a FOMO rush. And I love that. I love a stock that does that. The next thing to note is that these guys are thinly traded. Look, this is like a year. This is 1 year's worth of trading from 2019 to 2020. And you can see that's probably like 60 days worth of trading out of the 240 trading days, roughly, I think. So these guys are very thinly traded. There's not much volume. So there's not going to be too much sell pressure. So that was what really took my interest. And if I bring up the 3-minute chart here, I got in and open at 19 cents. And in hindsight, could have entered here at the horizontal at 18 cents, but I didn't. I still felt comfortable with my entry. It's perfectly fine at 19 cents. And the volume was dying off as it rode up to 24.5. And that's where I decided to exit at 24 cents. So to me, that felt like I bought the low and sold the high, and I was happy with it, despite the fact that it came back and rallied into the afternoon. So I tweeted out that from previous close to the high, that 19.5 to 18 cents, particularly 18 cents would have been a brilliant re-entry point if it got there, but it didn't manage to. It carried on, and I kind of missed out on the rest, but I was happy with that trade. For me, that was top to bottom, pull back, and it carried on. I'm still happy with that 26% profit. So if you're interested in my sort of live tweet, my entries and exits, I tweeted them out at Demoniaco ASX, and you're welcome to see what I posted, what I entered and exited at. So moving on to VRS. Actually, before I do that, let's just have a look at WOA on the HotCopper forums. And this is exactly what I mean. Beyond Meat's Australian edition, right? This is what someone posted. And I mean, this is exactly the story that I was predicting. It's people would see this as Beyond Meats. And that's the trade. Now, these guys might very likely carry on to tomorrow. I don't know. Again, it's not a recommendation to buy. But based on this volume, based on how it closed, it wouldn't surprise me if this kept on rallying. But I'm not interested in holding overnight for speculative stocks. Particularly the fake meat sector, I just have no interest in it. And it doesn't strike me as something that could multi-bag or anything like that. So I was happy with the 26% that I took off the table for that one. So moving on to VRS. Now this one was interesting. Before I look at the stock price, let's just look at the announcement that came out. And this is kind of the story that I spotted with this stock. It really was the headline and these $2 figures. In fact, I didn't even read the bottom half of this document. The news came out at like 11:40, I think it was, in the morning. So right before lunchtime. You'd have 15-20 minutes to digest it if you caught it right as it came out. Most people would probably read it in the last 5 minutes and make a trading decision based on that. So this company, which I think was about 11 million market cap, I could be wrong, but that sounds about right off the top of my head. So Veris or VRS secures additional work in Melbourne Metro Tunnel Project. Now, there's a couple of things to digest there. Firstly, these guys have an infrastructure project, the tunnel project. They have it with either a council, a local council, or a state government, because it's the Melbourne Metro. So it's a government project, it's infrastructure, and they've got additional work. That's like 3 pieces of good news all in the headline. And they've got 900K, which is a pretty unremarkable amount of money. And they've got existing $22.5 million in contract value for the project. Now, the choice of words here is important. This isn't $22.5 million in revenue, because revenue doesn't mean too much. It's all about profit, right? Are these guys cash flow positive? Who knows? It doesn't say in the document. It just says $22.5 million of project contract value, right? Not revenue, project value. Project contract value. So that's an important thing to note, is it's just a different way to perceive this document. People see an 11 million market cap and they see a $22.5 million project and they go, it's undervalued. But that's not the case, because you can't really tell much about the project or the financials of the document, of the company, sorry. So if we look here on VRS, we can see there's a hell of a lot of shares that were traded well above this existing price. And we see this major support level here at 4.75 cents. It just crumbled right through. So I would imagine there's a lot of unhappy holders. Now, if we bring up the 3-minute chart, we can see, and the interesting thing to note is in the final minutes of this stock before it opened up, the buy side was stacking hard. It went from 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, all the way to 3.9 in the space of what seemed like a minute and a half. So there was a lot of FOMO kicking in. People wanted in. Now, I don't want to buy into a stock that does that. That's immediately like 30% up from previous close. And its position is there's a lot of shares above it, which probably would be happy to get out as soon as possible. So I didn't want to jump in. I was happy to buy at maybe 3.2, 3.3 and push it to 3.9 and sell it at 3.9. But that didn't end up being the case. So these guys unfortunately just dumped instantly. So this is another reason why I don't have an order in. If I can't get in on the auction, I just don't have an order in at all. There's no point. There's no point having an order at 3.4 if it's auctioning and opening at 3.9, because there's always this risk happening. Within 30 seconds, this dumped 2.8 million shares, I think it was, and it just one big seller just dumped. Now, the important thing to note about this sell-off was it all happened extremely quickly, and there was no sell side left, right? So when the seller dumped to 3 cents, there wasn't like 3 or 4 million shares remaining on the sell side at 3 cents. It was maybe like a couple of 100,000. So I sat and watched for a minute or two to see if there was any more sell pressure, and there wasn't. So I was pretty happy to get in at 3 cents, which was the previous close. So to me, it was just like the stock just opened up basically at 3 cents. That's how I saw it. And on good news. Now, it's very unfortunate to people who bought at 3.8, 3.9, or even 3.7. That's just really, really bad luck that happened. But that's what happens when people FOMO into a stock. There's an opportunity for someone to really heavily sell into it, into the strength. So I waited, and I got lucky and caught it at 3 cents. So the interesting thing about when I bought was there was still some on the sell side. There was a couple of 100,000 shares at 3.3, 3.4, 3.5, 3.6. And it slowly stacked on. And it was good because that meant that the spread was less. It wasn't no longer 2.9 versus 3.3. It was more like 3 cents versus 3.1 cents. So the spread was less. And there weren't too many shares. So I thought the story was really good. The infrastructure story. The stock itself was unremarkable. If this was like a mid-cap stock, it was just no. Like, there's nothing really good about this announcement. Like, there just wasn't. It was about me understanding how other people might interpret the story. And yeah, so I bought in at 3, and I saw at 3.7 cents and 3.8 cents there was very little shares. And if I was a buyer at 3.9 cents, if I got trapped at 3.8, 3.9, what I would do as a new trader is I would wait and I would try and sell into strength. I wouldn't put my shares up straight away because I don't want to deter people from buying the stock. I don't want people to go, oh, look at that huge sell side. So what I thought is around 3.6 cents is when the people trapped up here, 3.8, 3.9, is when they might try and exit. And it turns out to be a very good sort of position to close out on. So I traded it from 3 to 3.6 cents. There was a good story behind it. There was enough volume to push it up and get out at a good 20%. And then, of course, the remaining sellers, at least I believe it's the buyers, were the ones that pushed this down to 3 cents. They might have seen this as it was turning as the last opportunity to exit, because I can't see anyone really wanting to hold this when it looks like this. So I can't imagine holding a stock like this overnight. It'll just grind down. So I hope that gives some sort of insight into how I see microcap stocks. If you can't tell already, I'm not interested in trading value for microcaps. I trade value for small and mid caps because they're established companies that are genuinely oversold. You can tell just by their financials at where they're at and where they're going in the future. For microcaps, it's all about the story for me. I don't think that microcaps should really be an investment, really. I mean, it's not financial advice. It's just my opinion that microcaps are just garbage. Most of them, like 99.5%, just don't go anywhere. Some of them will hit 100 million market cap, but they don't stay there for long. I can't really name too many companies that went from microcap to small cap to medium cap, or mid cap, sorry. It just doesn't really happen. So for me, it's about getting in and getting out as quickly as possible with as much profit as possible. And I really do heavily rely on my experience of when I was a new trader, because I know how I read these documents as a new trader, because that's what I did before. I was someone that bought into these stocks looking at the story and going, oh, this looks fantastic. This is great. This is going to be the next Beyond Meats. Or look at these guys. They're building the next, rail infrastructure or whatever the hell they were building. But no, these are just stories, and it's all about buying in nice and cheap for me and selling out at the best possible opportunity. So that's how I trade microcaps. It's pretty unremarkable. I just have Hot Copper open. I go to the announcements section and I have an auto refresh tool for price sensitive news, and every 30 seconds it'll refresh. And if the headline's good, then I'll read the document. I'll check the number of shares on issue, see how much cash they have, and that's it. Trade the trade. So that's how I trade microcaps when they're running hot. Have a good one, guys.